All right, so thank you guys for leading us into our discussion today. Much appreciated. So I just want to briefly follow up on where our presentation group ended their discussion. And I just want to get a quick survey from the class, like, what do you guys think of when you think of, say, the 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights? What does this bring to mind for you?
Aladdin.
Okay. Aladdin. For pretty much everybody, Disney's Aladdin.
I've never heard of it before now.
Disney's Aladdin or the 1001 Nights?
1001 Nights.
Okay.
I've definitely heard of Aladdin.
Had you heard of it in the alternate title, The Arabian Nights? Nope, we're completely unaware of it.
That was the only thing I had ever heard of it as.
Mhm.
And even when I was reading literature, I was actually hard pressed to find it if I searched it.
Yeah, it's generally, if you're doing research on this, you often have to refer to the Arabian Nights. You know, now the text in Arabic, it's like, why the hell would they call it the Arabian Nights, right? So when we talk about the Arabian Nights, we're talking solely about the text in translation and the way it's been transmitted elsewhere. And in a lot of ways, this is part of what makes this text important. The fact that it has been so widely transmitted outside of its home culture, right? So when we looked at something like, when we looked at the Kheber Nagast right before break, right? This is a text that is largely unknown outside of the circles of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, right? It's not something that is circulated broadly in any other culture. For a lot of people, their entire image, particularly if we're talking about people in the 18th and 19th centuries, right? Their entire image of the Middle East was drawn from the 1001 Nights. And we see this persist in the way the Middle East in particular is portrayed even in the 20th century. How many of you have ever seen like any of those, like there are those old, like those shitty fantasy movies with Sinbad, from the late 60s, early 70s, I think. There's Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger. What's the one with the guy who ended up playing Doctor Who? Sinbad and the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is the one from the late 50s. I remember my father telling me that back when you could go to the movie theater in Detroit for 5 cents and sit there all day, he and his buddies sat there and watched it like 8 times. The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, that's the other one, right? And if you watch a movie like The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, right, none of the actors in the movie are Arabic. None of them look Arabic. Sinbad is played by blonde-haired, blue-eyed John Philip Law, right? The slave girl whom Sinbad falls in love with is portrayed by the Bond girl Caroline Munro, right? They're all American or British. And what they tend to play up is sort of the sexiness and exoticism of the Mediterranean world. And this is all part and parcel of a discourse about the East that the presentation group was touching on there at the end, right? What we call Orientalism. Now, this particular phenomenon is probably best defined in a book by the Palestinian-American literary theorist Edward Said. Right, now Said was influenced by another thinker, a French philosopher by the name of Michel Foucault. And Foucault argued that what's really kind of most important in any given culture is power. Where power is seated and how the people who wield power exercise it, right? They exercise that power to determine what is normal, what is abnormal, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable. And academic disciplines do the same sorts of things. So what an Orientalist discourse does, right? And Orientalism was a field of academic study. What you had were a bunch of Europeans and Americans making a lot of decisions about what it meant to be an Easterner, right? To be an Arab, or to be an Indian, or to be Chinese or Japanese, right? And the way, particularly in the early years of these disciplines, this typically worked, we found the Westerner often projecting values he did not want to see in himself onto other cultures, right? So if the Englishman's, for example, self-definition is as follows, right? Oh, I'm English. This means I'm hardworking, I'm temperate, and I'm chaste. This is my cultural self-definition. So the way I then define the cultural other, right, the way I then define the Arab or the Indian, right, if I'm hardworking, then he must be lazy. If I'm temperate, then he must be constantly intoxicated. If I'm chaste, then he must be promiscuous. So they exoticize the other, often based on very flimsy evidence. And this discourse then kind of takes on a life of its own, right? If we look, for example, out of 18th, 19th century French paintings, what are often called odalisques or arabesques, right? They are often paintings of, say, like harem situations in the Middle East, right? We have say like a bunch of women lounging around naked, smoking hashish, right? These are the kinds of images that come for the average Westerner to define the East and what the East is like. And the Knights, at least the way it's received and transmitted in the West, is a big part of this. Now, you guys talked about it being banned in various countries, or at least suppressed in various countries at various times. And this is true. But the reasons for this largely have to do with certain very conservative religious interpretations of what the Quran does and does not allow in terms of imaginative literature, right? So what we have here in the Thousand and One Nights is not something that most people in the Middle East would consider a particularly valuable or important cultural artifact, right? For them, what this is pop culture, right? This is medieval Arabic pop culture. It's, it would be their equivalent of like Batman comics. It's not intended necessarily, or wasn't intended, to be read as serious literature. This is just stories people told themselves to be entertained, often in public forums. Now, that gets at one of the other big issues with this text, and you guys noted this as well, right? That it's a composite. There is no single author. Right? No identified author anywhere. And the tales themselves have a variety of origins. Only some are Arabic. Others are Indian. Some seem to have an African origin. Right, so these are tales that many are Persian. In fact, the names of most of the characters in the frame story are Persian. Shahriyar, Shahzaman, Shahrazad, these are all Persian names, right? You can tell sort of from that prefix Shah, which is a Persian word that means king. Even the era in which the frame story is set. Right, if we look on page 556, it is related, but God knows and sees best what lies hidden in the old accounts of bygone peoples and times, that long ago, during the time of the Sassanid dynasty, in the peninsulas of India and Indochina, there lived two kings who were brothers. So, the Sassanid dynasty were the last pre-Islamic dynasty in Persia. Right. When those invading armies from the Arabian Peninsula came in and swept out the old regime, this is the old regime they swept out. So this points on the one hand to a Persian origin for much of the text. But the fact that it's set in the Sassanid Empire and not on the Arabian Peninsula, but in India and Indochina, I think is particularly important here, given what this text is and what it means within its own cultural context, right? So, India and Indochina, right, so set far away. Sassanid Empire, so set back in the past. What then does this allow the compilers of the text to do? What excuse does this allow them to make then, as far as the morality or ethics of their tales are concerned?
Situations where Orientalism, they can prescribe all the bad traits to, well, that's not really us.
Yeah.
It's Bob over there in the
Yeah,
corner.
yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, there are some things in these tales that are a little bit naughty, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, there are some things in these tales that, yeah, kind of skirt the edges even of contemporary good taste, right? But yeah, they can get around that with the whole long ago and far away thing. Yeah, they can ascribe these behaviors to past peoples who lived a long way away.
Especially if it's a religious culture talking about culture before their religion.
Yeah.
They were all evil heathens.
And yet this is loaded with anachronism, right? So we have these Sassanid dynasty kings, and yet, we don't get any portions of this, any of this portion of the text in your excerpt, but a lot of the tales center around a late 8th century caliph by the name of Harun al-Rashid, right, who lived long after the Sassanid dynasty was gone. We also have here, how does Shahriyar and Shahzaman actually behave, right? Do they seem to, at least on a surface level, adopt Islamic behaviors or beliefs?
Doesn't it say at one point that they pray, or was that one of the side stories?
The two kings?
The two kings, yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think that
There was any
Going out and netting
specific.
a woman every single night.
Yeah, well, that's not the sort of thing that most major religious traditions condone, right?
And I mean, part of the thing is like Islam emphasizes fairness.
Mm-hmm.
So being, it's almost unfair for you to bet a wife. And
Sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think
Almost.
that,
Yeah, I think we can cut the almost there. Yeah, I think.
I mean, like, even though sometimes polygamy would be allowed in Islam,
Mm-hmm.
it emphasizes a fairness to an extent that I think it would definitely fly in the face of Islam.
Well, it's not polygamy, she's dead.
Yeah, technically you are correct.
I just can't figure out how the king is expected their line to continue.
It didn't need to at that point.
It's not
Yeah, well,
a well thought out plan for the longevity of your.
no, it's not. Yeah, it's not a good way to continue your dynasty. You're right. That's
Well, shoot, you're killing all the young women in your kingdom. They're,
yeah.
Well, they-
Yeah, there will be other issues caused by this, but a king is primarily concerned with the king.
Yeah, you would think that a good king ought to be primarily concerned with the welfare of the kingdom, right? And ensuring continuity of government and ensuring order within his lands. But King Shahryar is mostly concerned with exacting a brutal vengeance on slightly over 50% of the population.
let's see her cheat on me now.
Yeah. Anybody with 2X chromosomes, right? That's the idea here. So I think that while the kings may not be exhibiting behavior that is in the actual spirit of Islam, they do superficially, on occasion, adopt Islamic behavior. For example, when they have been, let's say, strong-armed, coerced by the demon's wife, right? What do?
Have sex with her.
They do, yes. And then, when they're done, what do?
Give her
For the rings.
They give her the rings, and once she's got the rings, what do? But before they even leave, they do a little dance, right? On page 561. When Shahryar and Shahzaman heard what the young woman said, they were greatly amazed, danced with joy, and said, O God, there is no power, no strength, save in God the Almighty, the Magnificent. Great is woman's cunning. So they say a little version here of the Shahada as they do their little dance of joy. Right? We see also in the statement that the woman makes to them, 100 men have known me under the very horns of this filthy, monstrous cuckold, who has imprisoned me in this chest, locked it with 4 locks, and kept me in the middle of this raging, roaring sea. He has guarded me and tried to keep me pure and chaste, not realizing that nothing can prevent or alter what is predestined, and that when a woman desires something, no one can stop her. This is also an adaptation of a particular principle that we talked about when we discussed the Quran, right? How does the Quran define sort of human free will and agency?
We haven't.
Nothing can happen if God doesn't allow it, right?
Is it Ishna Allah as God wills?
Bismillah, something like that. I think, yeah, something like that.
But
Which-
it's as God wills is a
Yeah.
mantra that they.
Right, and the basic idea here, yeah, if something is ordained, right, it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, the female itself is a character, like, that is popular in the tradition because, like, women as this, oh God, there's a name for it, like a seductress that's kind of evil at the same time.
You're thinking of like a femme fatale?
Yeah, they kind of like make references in some of these that they might have like suppressed some of it or changed some of it so
Mhm.
that they don't specifically say this is like a seductress, but at the same
Mhm.
time, like her behavior kind of fits in line with it.
So you're talking about the women provokes everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do look at our legs.
Yeah, and I'm not even really necessarily worried about that part here at the moment, right? But I think that where this does come in is actually like the lesson that these kings take away from the incident with the demon's wife, right? What's the lesson they ought to take away from this about what their relations were like with their wives? if we look at the similarity between the demon's wife and their wives, right? How is the demon's wife treated?
Bad.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, she's locked in a freaking chest.
Yeah, she's locked in a chest in the bottom of the ocean, right?
Could be a nice chest.
And he takes her out and unlocks the chest when he wants to take a nap in her lap, right? Whatever that means. So
Maybe.
So we have the demon's wife in the chest, right? Now, what about the lives lived by Shahrayar's and Shahzaman's wives?
Alright, see, I'm going to visit my brother.
Uh-huh. And yeah, you get to stay home, right?
Bye.
You stay where you are in the palace.
And don't do anything.
Don't do anything. Oh, there you are with the kitchen boy. I kill you both myself with my bare hands and hurl you off the off the balcony, right? Yeah, go ahead, darling.
that's one of the other things, like the king keeps talking about, oh, of all people it was with the kitchen boy. Well, obviously the kitchen boy treated her better than
Uh-huh.
you did.
Class is an issue here, right?
Yeah.
Class is an issue. Yeah, both of the wives betray their husbands with slaves.
Do it still work like that in today's society? Like,
Pardon?
I'm trying to relate to a story. Do this work in today's society? Like, if a wife cheating her husband because another guy may do something he can't do for her, is that still part of something like that, or?
Well, I think there is something sort of similar to that going on, right? You got the demon's wife in the box. You've got the king's wives living these very constrained lives, at home, right? They're, basically property. So why is it that they find comfort in the arms of slaves?
Because clearly they're treating them better.
Yeah, because there's an identification there, right?
The king is
They're
treating his
basically a
wife.
slave to the king.
Yeah.
The king is treating his wife as property, and slaves were his property. The
Mhm.
queen and the slave are the same class.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily they're treating them better, because that one guy called the queen, he was like, you slut.
Okay, yeah.
Whatever.
She laughed, though.
Yeah, Masood's language is a little salty, yeah. And certainly suggests, like a slave dominating a high-class woman, right? But yeah, I think that, the idea there is that, they see themselves as kind of on the same level, right? So, this is the idea, this is the lesson that the kings should be taking away from their encounter with the demon's wife, right? Aha! That if you treat women like slaves, that will lead them to betray you, right? Because you cannot stop them from doing what is preordained. You cannot stop them from working their own will.
So that the women are always going to do it as slaves.
They're not
If you,
natural.
yeah. And that's the thing, right?
Oh, why would
What
you think about it logically?
well, yeah, and I think you're thinking of it more the direction Shahrayar goes, right? That, aha, if women will always work their will, no matter what I do to them, then I must kill them all. Right? So he's learning the wrong lesson.
But only after he's had his way with them.
Yes. So he is actually increasing his level of arbitrary dominance over women, right? I will possess you sexually, then I will kill you. And that's it. And he does this to women of all classes in his society, right? He does it to highborn women, he does it to commoners. Everyone is subject to this in his little scheme. Right? So because of 3 women who betrayed their husbands, all women must suffer. So getting back to, that Islamic principle of God's basic fairness, right? Shahrayar is misinterpreting that doctrine. He's feeling only his own personal hurt, and because he is someone who has the power to take it out on other people, right? He is treating then his subjects unfairly mercilessly, tyrannically, right? And so this is where Shahrazad comes in. Right. Why does this young, beautiful, intelligent woman want to marry this tin pot tyrant?
So the other one.
Stop.
She's smarter than he is.
Okay, yeah, she's more clever than he is. And yeah, the idea is to keep him occupied long enough to stop killing people, right? She will tell her stories night after night after night and give him a little cliffhanger at the end of each one to keep him interested so that he will not execute her in order to find out how the story ends. But then it becomes like, I don't know how many of you have ever watched like old Monty Python episodes, right, where one sketch always then just sort of bleeds into another, right? Same sort of thing here, right? One story bleeds into another story into another story.
That's the frame story, right?
Yeah, this is the frame story.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, right, the frame story is really, it's just kind of a flimsy construction to hold a great big collection of tales from a variety of traditions together. But there are a number of commonalities that run through several of these tales. Right? So for example, when we look at the tale of the merchant and his wife, right, this is the tale that the vizier tells to Shahrazad to get her to not want to marry the king, right? What's the gist of this tale? What's the gist of the tale of the merchant and his wife?
Do what I say, or I'm gonna.
And he decides to beat her into submission.
Yeah. The wife wants something that would be bad for him, right? She wants the merchant to reveal to her the speech of the animals, even though he knows that if he does this, he will die. But she insists and keeps pressing the point. And so, in order to preserve his life and order in his household, he just takes her into a room with a stick and beats her. Now, does the text as a whole seem to actually endorse this viewpoint? Yeah, this is exactly the same shit that Shahryar is doing, right? What the vizier is suggesting to his daughter, right? This is exactly what I will do to you if you do not desist, right? This is the problem. This is the problem, is, men with authority governing by force. Right, okay, I can't win you over with rational arguments. I will win you over with violence. Same thing in the tale of the merchant and the demon, right? The first story that Shahrazad tells to her new husband, right? What is the merchant's crime? How has he angered the demon?
He accidentally killed the demon's son.
Yeah, he's riding through an oasis, eating dates, absent-mindedly flinging pits here and there. Okay, so littering is not something that should be encouraged. But, yeah, what kind of demon is killed by an errant date pit, right?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if I was missing something there. Like, I mean, I really just don't understand how that just kills them.
Yeah, well, and I think that's part of the idea here, right? Is there's no way this merchant could have assumed that the date pits he was spitting out would hurt anybody. Right? He didn't see anybody around. It's just a date pit. He didn't mean to do anyone any harm. Right? His offense is completely accidental. He was not trying to spite the demon. He was not trying to kill the demon's son. But yeah, just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? The demon has decided you have to die. So this is another arbitrary use of authority, right? I don't care what the circumstances were. I don't care what you say happened. My son is dead. You're right here. I'm going to kill you. So the tales that the old men then tell to get the merchant out of this predicament also reflects the larger situation in the frame story. Right, if we look at the first old man's tale, page 570. Demon, this deer is my cousin, my flesh and blood. I married her when I was very young, and she a girl of 12, who reached womanhood only afterward. For 30 years we lived together, but I was not blessed with children, for she bore neither boy nor girl. Yet I continued to be kind to her, to care for her, and to treat her generously. Then I took a mistress, and she bore me a son, who grew up to look like a slice of the moon. Meanwhile, my wife grew jealous of my mistress and my son. One day, when he was 10, I had to go on a journey. I entrusted my wife, this one here, with my mistress and son, bade her take good care of them, and was gone for a whole year. In my absence, my wife, this cousin of mine, learned soothsaying and magic, and cast a spell on my son and turned him into a young bull. Then she summoned my shepherd, gave my son to him, and said, "Tend this bull with the rest of the cattle." The shepherd took him and tended him for a while. Then she cast a spell on the mother, turning her into a cow, and gave her also to the shepherd. So we see a couple of links here, right, with the stories about Shahryar and Shahzaman's wife, right? What's the first link here we see between this old man's wife and those other wives?
She betrays him and goes on a trip.
Yeah, she betrays him when he leaves, right? He is no longer physically present. And I mean, okay, yeah, going off for a whole year seems a little excessive, right? And does she betray him sexually, though? Now, she takes the mistress that he has taken, because she can't bear children, and turns both her and the child into a cow. Now, there are echoes here of the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac. How many of you are familiar with the story of Abraham and Isaac? Okay, how's Abraham and Isaac go, Emily?
Abraham's married to Sarah.
Yep.
She can't bear children.
Yep.
So I can't remember her name, but he gets a new wife,
Mm-hmm.
has a son. His name's Ishmael.
Yep.
Suddenly Sarah's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah's jealous. So Abraham sends his wife and Ishmael away.
Yep. And yeah, the story in Islamic tradition is slightly different than it is in Christian tradition, right? Now, in Judeo-Christian tradition, Isaac, the son of Sarah, is the one who's favored, right? In Islamic tradition, Ishmael is the true son of Abraham, right? And a lot of this has to do with how these lineages trace their descents, right? The Israelites traced their descent from Isaac. Arabs traced their descent from Ishmael. So this is how they connect themselves to Abraham. But yeah, and we have, right, the mother who is a handmaiden of a son sent away by the jealous wife. Now, how does the story of Abraham and Isaac then continue on?
So isn't that the one where God tells him to sacrifice his son and he takes him off to the...
Yeah, and then depending on
Yeah.
which religion is which son. Like,
Yeah.
With the Islamic tradition, he tells him to sacrifice Ishmael. With the Judeo-Christian, it's Isaac.
Yeah, so this holiday that he comes back to celebrate, the Feast of the Immolation, is meant to commemorate God telling Abraham to sacrifice his son. And so this is mirrored in the situation where he is about to kill the fat bull, right? But, when it cries and shows him affection, right, he's not able to do it. So, apart from this reference to the Abraham and Isaac story, right, how does this refer to the outer frame story? Right, we have a jealous wife who's done something to spite her husband. But then, how is the problem resolved? How do things get fixed?
Gets another witch to save his, or turn his son back into a human, and then he turns his wife into a
Into a deer, yeah.
deer.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So a good woman fixes the damage that was done by the bad woman, right?
And then marries him.
Yeah. Much as Shahrazad has now, she's married the king, and she is keeping his mind occupied and off of murder. Right? The whole process here that's being applied, right? The idea is that she's going to heal the king's psychosis by demonstrating that women are not base, cowardly, deceptive creatures as he thinks they are. That in fact, only a small number of women who have hurt him may be like this, and that some of this may depend on how they're treated. For example, the second Old Man's Tale, right? What do you know? So what seems to be the dominant note of the second old man's personality?
He's kind, caring.
Yeah. He's a nice guy, right? How does he treat his brothers?
Really good.
Yeah, especially especially considering what they wanted to do to
You
him.
guys both fucked up, but I'll give you half my money.
Yeah. His brothers go off on trading expeditions that ruin them, and because he's prosperous and successful, he continues to share with them, right? It's like, well, okay, you guys can have some of the proceeds from my business, you can open your own shops back up. Well, socialist, maybe.
I don't know, man. You distribute that wealth for equal.
Each according to his needs. So, we see kindness and generosity in the way he treats his brothers, right? Where else do we see this guy displaying kindness and generosity?
When his brothers try and kill him, and the demon, who is now his wife,
Yeah.
offers to kill them, and he's like, no, don't kill them, even though that's what they were going to do.
Yeah, it's okay, just turn them into dogs, yeah. No, but yeah, he begs his demon wife not to kill his brothers, right? Spare them, even though they would have killed me.
And he tries to actually get them back to human, which, by the way,
Yeah,
is
they're good.
beyond me. Like, I think they're safer as dogs.
Like, they're on the way to be back to humans.
Well, and
Yeah.
if you go back to the story about like how women are treated and stuff, she's a demon woman. She can do whatever the fuck she wants, and
Yeah.
she like doesn't kill him because he's nice to her.
She can, exactly, right? Yeah, so what state is she in when he finds her?
Bad.
Like
Yeah.
a poor beggar woman.
Poor beggar woman, tattered, right? Not looking exactly promising marriage material. But, right, she says to him, oh my lord, page 575, be charitable and do me a favor, and I believe that I shall be able to reward you for it. I replied, I am willing to do you a favor, regardless of any reward. She said, O my lord, marry me, clothe me, and take me home with you on this boat, as your wife, for I wish to give myself to you. I, in turn, will reward you for your kindness and charity, the Almighty God willing. Don't be misled by my poverty and present condition. So, because he is kind to her without thought of reward, he gets a reward from her, right? She saves his life and teaches his brothers a lesson. because he's been kind to a woman he had no reason to regard in any way. In fact, I mean, really, in some ways, he's been excessively kind, right? You know, what he does goes a little bit above and beyond here. But because of his generosity, right, he continues to prosper and is protected from harm. So, there's a lesson here for our tyrannical king as well, right? Maybe, just maybe, if you stop going around murdering women after you sleep with them, your kingdom will fall into line of itself, right? That, you know, that Taoist principle of, you know, like ruling through inaction, right? Just let the virtue flow out of you. Sit motionless upon your throne. And stop killing people. So, how did this go for you? Did you guys have any questions about any of this? Yeah, Darlene.
The only thing, and like I don't know if this actually has any bearing on the story, but I thought it was weird that he can be so patient with her telling the story night after night after night, but he's not patient enough to like not kill people.
It's a really good story.
Because like I got, it got to the point where I was skipping those excerpts.
Yeah.
Because it was so repetitive and boring. Like just finish the story.
Yeah, well, and even we noticed as well that the excerpts, those little italicized excerpts get shorter, right? And eventually he stops even saying, I'm just, you know, I'm going to kill her in the morning.
They just have a pause at the.
Yeah. And again, like, I think, you know, it's that the idea, again, that the frame story is just largely a device for containing this diverse collection of tales, right? There is a point to the frame story, as we see, you know, that idea of, you know, hey, maybe deal with people justly, just a little bit. Thanks. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about those little sort of interstitial bits where, you know, but we actually do see in a couple of those, though, right, that he seems to be learning good management over the course of these tales, right? You know, that he, let's see, where is the one that I'm thinking of? Right, page 570, right? But dawn broke and morning overtook Shahrazad, and she lapsed into silence. Then Dinarzad said, "Sister, what a lovely story." Shahrazad replied, "What is this compared with what I shall tell you tomorrow night? It will be even better. It will be more wonderful, delightful, entertaining, and delectable if the king spares me and lets me live." Wink, wink. The king was all curiosity to hear the rest of the story and said to himself, "By God, I will not have her put to death until I hear the rest of the story and find out what happened to the merchant with the demon. Then I will have her put to death the next morning as I did with the others." Then he went out to attend to the affairs of his kingdom, and when he saw Shahrazad's father, he treated him kindly and showed him favors, and the vizier was amazed. When night came, the king went home, and when he was in bed with Shahrazad, so on and so forth, right? So, he's being nicer now to his underlings, right? You know, there's another one of these bits where, you know, he's attending more justly and more with more focus to the affairs of the kingdom, right? Instead of just going out and hunting and pursuing his own luxury. So we do see in these little bits that the king is gradually changing.
Well, doesn't he kind of do that in the very beginning with her? Like, if he was so solely focused on what he wanted, why would he grant her to have her sister on the last night when she's just there to supply his needs?
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, that's the whole, you know, why do they give you whatever you want to eat, right, on the night before you're executed, right?
Because why not?
Yeah.
It's not like she was like living a life of luxury either. She was like right under the bed. I mean.
Well, and I think we also have to remember that notions of privacy were much different then than they are now.
I still like find that to be a quite awkward moment. Like she's deflowered with her sister, isn't it? Like a younger sister right below her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, remember that the whole point of this is being nicer to women, right? But no, yeah, I mean, honestly, like, one, I think we have to remember, A, it's just a story. Two, you know, that people were less hung up about stuff like that, you know, basically before there were private rooms. The private room is largely a product, like, I'm just gonna short tangent into architectural history here, right? The private room is largely a product of, say, like the 18th and 19th centuries. Most people, even rich people, tended to spend much of their time in like large sort of communal sleeping quarters, halls, things of that nature. So yeah, honestly, yeah, the sister being there for them, you know, wouldn't have been that big a deal. And again, it's, you know, it's like, okay, this is her last request, sure. You want your sister hanging out? Great. I'm just gonna kill you in the morning. And then he doesn't. All right, any other questions? All right, then we'll let you go a little early today. We're going to continue with the rest of this next time. There will be severed heads and magic talking fish. So stay tuned for that.
I didn't think so.
Reading that.